KTNF, AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. Good morning to all of you joining us locally by radio and streaming online. We appreciate you tuning in. Today is Sunday, October 14th. I'm your host, Maddie Love, in studio today with Hertzie Hertz, Julie Love, and our returning guest, a man who can bend spoons with the power of thought and perhaps a subtle application of force. A man who can read your mind no matter how short the story. I thought that was good. World traveler, speaker, and mentalist. Happy to welcome back David Gamut, who is in studio with us on this gorgeously beautiful snowy day.
Oh, God.
Lies. I was just going to say I feel personally attacked by that short story.
What do you mean? Like, it was like, I don't know. Did you ever listen to Skeptic's Guide? It was like a novella.
Oh, Lord. Don't give me another podcast to listen to.
Wait, you don't listen to Skeptic's Guide? Oh, that's okay. It is kind of a sausage fest of a podcast. Am I allowed to say that on radio? Okay,
I think you can say sausage.
Okay.
Sausage is good, right?
Yeah.
Eric's kind of giving us a half.
Oh, okay. Just checking.
Okay.
That was a little bit of in-studio technical banter there.
Ah.
Thank you, Eric.
Oh, is it not actually?
No, we are actually live.
Yes.
Like, wait a minute.
This was all a test. We finally fooled David.
David, damn it.
Are you allowed to say your name on air?
Well, I just did.
Wait, if we say it 3 times, do we get power over you or something?
Shh. Fake news. Don't give away the secrets. Beetlejuice.
We had you as a guest back in June, and immediately following the conversation, we were in the parking lot, and I realized, you know what? We really need to have you back on. We didn't get to everything that we had wanted to talk about. So I'm really happy that all of us could be back in studio too, because I was listening to this. I listened to the last time you were on in June, on the way in here, just to listen to it again.
Oh,
You did way more homework than I did.
I feel honored.
It's not homework. That's a privilege.
Yeah.
I apologize to your ears.
Well, and just like back in June, we had dinner again this week before we came on.
Yeah,
which
you 2 had dinner. I had to skip out.
We 3 had dinner.
Yes,
3, sorry.
The 3 of us had Julie, myself, and David had dinner. I'm assuming the listeners missed that conversation we had at dinner, though, unless they were on the other side of the booth. If all of you were back there, that'd be really impressive.
That would be really impressive.
Also, if I put, a listening device under the table, which I totally didn't.
It was really loud in there, so you would not have heard anything.
No.
I'm also guessing that not everyone listening today was able to listen to the conversation that we had 4 months ago. So, with all that out of the way, could you reintroduce yourself to the audience?
Well, I'm David Gamut. I'm a mentalist based here in Minnesota. I do a lot of different corporate events where I speak and perform and do different workshops. Actually, the last time I was in here, I was just getting back from Barcelona, and this time I'm just getting back from Costa Rica, so it seems like every time I go to a Spanish-speaking country, I end up in this studio here. So that's kind of fun.
Could you give us a heads up on what your next itinerary is so we can make sure our schedules are clear?
Yes. I'll let you know the next time. Actually, next time might be something involving you guys, if this is an appropriate time to...
An appropriate time to talk about the winter solstice dinner, which
It's always
is
an appropriate time.
Yes, which is on December 15th. I don't know if tickets are on sale yet, but you should do a save the date, because I do believe we're in talks with Mr. David about having him in as our night of... Oh, shoot, we had a great tagline for this, and I can't remember what Heather wrote down.
Well, the tagline is yet to come, apparently. But either way, it sounds like David will be.
Yeah.
Yes, David. I'm going to look
attendance.
it up on Meetup and see if I can find it, because she had a really good one.
Well, before we went on air, talking about the winter solstice, we were talking about helping. You were talking about how you can sometimes help people. You work with them on training their brains. I'm
memory
assuming
and
way better than those apps I can play on my phone.
I could totally do that. I could totally use that.
Yeah. No.
You had mentioned teaching people how to say the alphabet backwards without them even realizing that you were teaching them.
Yeah.
Is there any tricks that you can demonstrate on the radio? Tricks was the wrong word. You said effects.
Effects. Like saying the alphabet backwards, or...
Well, anything, because we had talked about maybe doing something on air.
Oh, right. Yeah. No, I'm thinking... a little bit closer to the winter solstice dinner, we should probably do something either with some listeners, or I think Hertzie had a good idea about possibly
doing a mini fundraiser for the show. But heads up, it is on Meetup, by the way, so you can at least RSVP there. It's a save the date right now. It is the winter solstice, a night of magical disbelief.
Fantastic. It's a great tagline. So
I blame Heather.
so we should be able to sell is the wrong word. Have a donation.
We're going to auction you off, David.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to do.
Just my body is ready. All right. Yes, derailed complete, and we're only how many minutes in?
We'll have to stop the radio show. You broke the host. Well,
Everything said reflects the opinions of the guests.
No.
No.
So I'm just curious, how did this all start? Were you like 5 years old and realized that you could shape your friend's will into doing what you want? Or did you accidentally bend a spoon and go, oh, hey, cool?
So there's a couple of different pieces that kind of fell together. I remember when I was really, really young, I was watching with my grandma. There was a movie called Phenomenon with John Travolta. And I was like 8 years old at the time, and I watched that, and I remember just becoming fat. Like became one of my favorite movies. I was like, I want to do that or be that, and that was the end of that. And then I want to say I was about 16 or so. I saw David Blaine performing, and then I just kind of walked into a magic shop a little bit later, learned a few things. About a year later, I learned that mentalism was a thing, and I've always been really just in tune with people and trying to understand people, and, you know, it's kind of like a little radar dish. And so I just... As soon as I discovered mentalism was a thing, I immediately dived in, and I started learning everything that I could. And there's a couple of different perspectives that tend to be out there. So I just started to try to learn everything, whether it was considered psychic phenomena or psychological studying, because I wanted to know, well, what's BS, what's not, and so I wanted to understand it. And so I got a very broad grasp of things very quickly. And yeah, it just kind of kept spiraling from there. I learned a little bit of magic originally, so I would test mentalism while I was in high school under the guise of just performing some magic stuff so people wouldn't freak out. And I got, I'll say I got decent pretty quickly just because I was willing to fail, and most people aren't willing to fail. So yeah, it just kind of kept going from there.
And the speaking was an outgrowth of that?
Yes. I actually ended up meeting a guy who had, I want to say like 6, 7, 8 different degrees in like a ton of different things. And he ran, or he was one of the people who helped run Campus Atheists, Skeptics, Humanists for the University of Minnesota. And he met me actually at a magic shop that I worked at. And he knew what a mentalist was, and I was really impressed with that. He had met Banachek, and we ended up talking for about 9 hours, touching on everything from quantum physics to dark matter to psychology. I learned things from him. He learned things from me. We met up another day, talked another like 7 hours. Then he invited me to come speak at the U of M to the Cash Group. And so I went and I did like a 90-minute lecture on psychology and different things. And then it went from there to me going to the University of Michigan. Then I went to New York, and then I went, and it just kept spiraling. And I ended up like enjoying it and decided, well, screw it, this is what I'm going to do. And I just started speaking and performing, and it just kind of kept going from there. But yeah, it started at the U of M in terms of professional speaking events.
This is interesting because most podcasters do podcasting and then they get invited to speak.
Yes.
You seem to be doing,
Yes.
You seem to be kind of going maybe the opposite way.
You know, that seems to be how it usually goes. I typically dive into the deep end of the pool on what, like, I get this, like, obsessive focus with whatever it is I want to learn. And I just keep going. It's kind of crazy. And then I get to a certain point and I'm like, okay, that was fun. Let's try another thing. I don't know. I like lifelong learning. I do want to start my own podcast. I just need to kind of get past my little imposter syndrome in my head and actually put it out there. But yeah, we'll get it done.
That is amazing to me that, like, from our standpoint, like, you are well-spoken, you have confidence to go up on stage, you talked about, having the confidence to fail, like, and yet you're like, but I have imposter syndrome still. And
it's I don't know. I don't quite know what to do about that.
I saw this great cartoon this morning. I don't remember who posted it. And there's just one little thing was like, it was like how an artist sees himself. And it was like this person coming up to put a cake on the table. And like their cake was kind of like, whatever, not the best. And the cake next to it was just gorgeous. And it was like what the artist thinks. And it's like, oh, that cake's so much better. And it's like what the consumer or like what the other person thinks. So like, yes, 2 cakes. And it was like, I thought that was a perfect way of like, yeah, that's kind of how it is. Like maybe the first 2 episodes of your podcast won't be as good as you want them to be. But from our standpoint, it'd be like, yes, he's doing a podcast.
Yep.
Yeah, you might be accurate in that. All right. All right.
I was going to say, there's also a ton of resources to help with like editing and stuff. Because like, what doesn't it, Rich?
Oh, Rich Lyons.
Yeah, I want to
love Rich Lyons, past guest, friend of the show.
Oh yes, I want to contact him about Hersey Talks because I really should take that to a podcast form. It's too long for YouTube. And he probably would do a great job editing out all the banter.
Yeah, he's fantastic. We only have just a few seconds left before we have to go to break. But what I want to do when we come back from break is I want to ask you, like, or I guess what you can think about this during the break is, why is communication with other people so important to you?
Okay.
Because I feel like we all communicate, and that might be a good way to start the next segment. So, please stay with us through the break. Hertzie, Julie, and myself will return with Mentalist, speaker, and all-around fantastic person, David Gamut. You're listening to Atheist Talk on AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota. Welcome back to AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota. You're tuned in to Atheist Talk. I'm your host, Maddie Love, in studio with Julie Love, Hertzie Hertz, and returning guest mentalist David Gamut. If you're interested in getting involved in the conversation we're having today, the phone number is 952-946-6205. If you'd rather, you can send us an email at radio@mnatheist.org, tweet us at Atheist Talk, or leave a comment on the Facebook post for this episode over at facebook.com/Atheist Talk. I also want to give a quick shout out to Mark in Pennsylvania, a new listener who I had the good fortune of chatting with just by accident, trying to reserve a moving truck for a family member, and happened to be lucky enough to talk to an out-of-state listener. So thanks for being great at your job, Mark. And of course, thank you for listening. Yeah, no, Hertzie, you're like, oh, it's like, yeah, it was like,
really cool.
We have a listener?
Oh, come on. Don't sell us short. We're fantastic.
This is my imposter syndrome.
I manage the podcast feed for this show. I know how many listeners we have. So I'm not like, I don't want to brag, but like, we're doing well.
I know. I saw that once and went, wait, what?
But at the same time, it was like, no matter how many listeners you have, like, if you have 100,000 listeners, there's still 3 million or 300 million people in the United States.
Right.
Like, the odds of like picking up the phone to reserve a moving truck for a family member, and you just happen to get somebody who's like, hey, are you Maddie Love that does Atheist Talk? And it's like, yeah.
So fantastic.
I mean, that isn't exactly how the conversation went, but still, it was like,
That's pretty awesome.
It was pretty. It was pretty awesome. Yeah.
It reminds you that there's a worth to what you're doing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Like with my own podcast, every once in a while we get emails or whatever. Well, actually, we got an email this morning to our Facebook show talking about an old episode and asking for questions, and it's just like, it's really cool listeners. It's really cool when we interact with you because like we're sitting in this little dark room right now, having a really good time talking to each other, but it's still fun to talk. Like we do this because it's fun to talk to each other and to talk to you, whether that's on Facebook or Twitter or an email or anyway. Yes. Going into the break, David, I had asked you why communication is so important to you, and you've had 2.5 minutes, and then me blathering on and on and on. Do you have a response to that? Compelling question.
So to me, communication is really, really huge because I really feel like the most important thing in life is human connection. Like everything that we do comes back to that. It's all about like if you were the last person on earth and there was no one else left to impress or anything, everything would kind of lose its meaning. It's all about everyone else. And so when you have, I don't want to say when you're not quite clear in your communication or when you're not, doing it well. Ironically, this is kind of a word salad answer, but it really breaks that connection a bit. It makes things either awkward or it just kind of cuts off. But if you have the right tools in your toolbox, you can really talk to anybody and it can be completely it can flow naturally, and really communication is the only corrective tool we have as well to know if we've gone off course. So right now on Facebook, you see everyone just yelling at each other, and they're all talking past one another. No one's hearing anything the other person is saying. And so learning how to kind of pull that back and have an actual conversation is how you get past that. And so it plays into everything we do. No matter what you do, if you work in sales, if you're a radio host, if you're always talking to somebody at some point in transition. And so that communication becomes a really, really big tool that we tend to kind of gloss over, and we just assume everyone knows how to speak.
Yeah, I remember this was one of the things I really wanted to touch base with you.
Mm-hmm.
I think we briefly talked about it on the last show, but we didn't really get in depth into it. And you had mentioned, like Facebook. Mm-hmm. Twitter, I mean, is maybe worse because you have less characters, or maybe better because you have less characters. Right. I'm not sure which. But like, we live in a society and this culture that's dominated by theistic religion as atheists. Mm-hmm. And so I find myself a lot of times in the feeling kind of defensive. Mm-hmm. Even when I'm talking to like the most liberal, theistic, ecumenical believer, like they have a hard time understanding things from the secular perspective. Mm-hmm. Like, why? Like, what do you mean? Can't you have more believers on air with you? Like it's like, well, you're everywhere.
Yeah.
Like, come on. But can you share, like, do you have thoughts or strategies to help people, like, with different points of view, not just talk past each other?
Yeah, really talk less and listen more. And then whenever they say whatever it is that they say, ask them a question about it. Just say, what makes you believe that? Or why do you think this is this way? And just kind of dig in. And when we're in a society where we ignore each other so much, you're speaking, I catch one thing you're saying, and then now I'm just waiting for you to finish your story so I can tell my better story relating to that. And I stop listening, and then I end up going back about 10 minutes. We all do that. And so when someone actually is paying attention to what you say and they're really listening, they're asking questions, you notice that. And it almost feels like kind of like this person is interested in what I'm saying. And so it kind of earns a little bit more charity or patience or whatever. And when you ask them questions, they're going to want to tell you why they believe what they believe. And then when you tell them, okay, well, how about this then? Because this is what I see wrong with that. What do you think of this? Like, you're kind of earning your way into the conversation where they're going to have a real conversation with you. So a lot of the, like, tactics would be like your little tools. Strategy would be how you use them overall. The strategy is really to listen more, ask some more questions, and then point out your stuff that you want to talk about, because at that point, they're going to want to reciprocate that. If nobody wants to be a jerk, but if you say,
Hertz has her hand up. Is that because
I should say no one wants to be interpreted as a jerk?
Yeah, actually, I am thinking.
Besides our president,
all opinions are of guests and hosts and do not necessarily represent those of Minnesota Atheists. As you say that, I mean, I agree with you that when people are actually talking in good faith, that people don't want to be a jerk.
Right.
But
the conversation never starts that way.
Well, I do know that I have encountered, and truth be told, I have trolled, maybe some really conservative religious Christian sites before. But some people do want to be a jerk, and that is their sole purpose for being online. That's why there are Twitter accounts that are egg accounts, and
yeah.
But I understand what you're saying, and I'm purposely using the same word "but" over and over and over again because I did want to get around to talking about butt stuff with you.
Wow. That's a framing that the people listening are going to completely misinterpret. I thought we were talking about good communication.
Oh, that's
but
Yes. So there are, like, even outside of the context of debates, there are certain words that are really, really simple that have a major impact, even in our everyday conversation. So what she's referring to right there is the word but, not actual butts. So the word but
with one T.
Yes, with one T.
So do you like big butts?
that was a pregnant pause.
Well, I cannot lie, so
Yes, this is.
Okay, I'm done.
No,
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
The poor guy has got like 30 seconds before we go to our break.
Oh, God. All right. So the word but is kind of the magic eraser word of the English language. So you want to be really cognizant of how you're going to use it. Anything you put in front of the word but is going to be minimized. Anything you put after the word but is going to be maximized. So when you say to your children, I love you, but you really needed to start cleaning your room, you're kind of erasing that, and then it can cause different subtle issues later. How much time do we have before we go into the break?
We should probably take this up on the other side of the break.
Can do that.
I mean, what you were saying was fantastic, but we need to go to a break. Yes, we will talk about more butt stuff. Julian Hertzy and I will return to our discussion with guest David Gamut right after this short commercial break. This is Maddie Love. You're listening to Atheist Talk on KTNF, AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. Thank you for tuning in to Atheist Talk on AM 950 KTNF. I'm Maddie Love in studio this week with Hertzy Hertz, Julie Love, and Mentalist David Gamut. Before we continue with our conversation, we need to take a moment to thank our sponsors. All of us at Atheist Talk are asking for your help in keeping secular voices on the public airwaves and in podcast form. Atheist Talk is produced with funding from the Minnesota Atheists and Cucumbers Restaurant in Edina. Please consider visiting our sponsors, and if you do, let them know that you appreciate their support of Atheist Talk. If you would like to advertise on this program and help keep us on the air, please contact us at radio@mnatheist.org. This program is put together by dedicated volunteers and the generous donations of people like you. It's because of listeners like you that we're able to keep Atheist Talk on the radio and in podcast form. If you're able to help with a donation, you can do so over at our Radio Fund page or by becoming a patron. You can sign up for as little as $1 an episode over at patreon.com/atheisttalk and listen to all of our extended interviews, discussions, and skullduggery, and where the FCC isn't able to apply its antiquated religious restrictions on what words we use and whether or not we talk about butt stuff. Or Dragon Ball Z, or apparently in this Patreon.
I'm sorry. I was laughing when you said skullduggery because I was just like, I didn't make you watch that one.
No, I haven't seen that movie yet, but I will, unfortunately.
Oh, yes.
Minnesota Atheists is a 501c3 tax-deductible organization. When we say we couldn't do the show without you, we really do mean that. And, well, we are very grateful for all of your contributions. Music for Atheist Talk is by composer and member Brent Michael David. All right, mischief managed, and back to the conversation with David Gamut. David, yes. When we left you, we were talking about butt stuff, which, hey, I think it's kind of funny because in a way it's kind of it's a funny
it's going to
joke.
be a running joke for the rest of my career.
I hope so. I hope for the rest of your career, people are always coming up to you and saying, David, tell me about butt stuff. You are the butt stuff expert in Minnesota.
If this wasn't part of the the winter solstice talk, because we're going to negotiate that at Cucumbers later, but if it wasn't, it is now. As I get to introduce by you and say we're going to talk about butt stuff.
Oh my God!
Well,
all right.
The part that I find so fun about that is like it's a double pun because it's also like by saying butt stuff, it's like a way of
stuff.
Right. It's showing bad communication. Because I want to talk about one thing. If I want to say butt stuff, it like makes somebody think about something totally different.
I want to give a presentation on words now and just have a slide that says butt stuff.
See?
When
that
I
would
go
be fantastic.
Topic. Yeah, no.
It needs to have a GIF then.
Yes. No, it doesn't. It needs to have a GIF.
No. All right.
It should not have a GIF. It should have a GIF.
Oh,
we are not have peanut butter.
We're not getting into
GIF,
that. We're not getting into this.
Yes.
So
we will just
butt.
let that part fall into the cracks. You were going to talk about butts now.
Yes. The word butt. So, depending on what you want to minimize and you want to maximize, as a real life example, beforehand, you had said, what you're talking about is fantastic, but we have to go to a break. If you flip that, it becomes we have to go to a break, but what you're talking about is fantastic. And they kind of feel different when you're receiving them. It's an example that I give often is, say you're at work and your boss calls you into his office and he says, you're doing a great job, but you need to work on X, Y, and Z. Or they say, you need to work on X, Y, and Z, but you're doing a great job. Like, without even really messing with the tone, the way it comes across is completely different, and people don't think about that consciously. So you kind of have to train yourself to be aware of that, and then you just start doing it naturally. But you usually want to end on a positive note, just to kind of keep that goodwill going between the two people. It kind of fosters human connection. So
it's not like you're saying, hey, don't use the word but, in a conversation.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Just be
Just be
cognizant.
aware.
Yeah.
Yes, be aware of how you're using it and do it purposefully.
Yeah, and like we talked about a little bit in the break, and so we'll bring it up so the other people can hear. Well, I kind of knew a little bit about the word "but" and how it can change your conversation, and so I try to use words like "however" and such. And I'm always worried. It's like, does that have the exact same effect as "but," or is it is it different?
It's related but different. Yeah, I know. Isn't that a weird way to use the word "but"? So
It's different but related.
with however, it's think of it as like a softer version of that. It's not like you're completely erasing the previous point. You're just kind of putting a nuance into it.
Okay.
So it's sort of, so that's what I mean. It's sort of the same, but not exactly. You can also there's all sorts of different words. If you don't know of a way to do it in the manner in which you want the correct feeling to come across, because life is a feeling process. Even if there's no emotions in the words you're saying, there's a feeling you receive when you interpret these words. So if you don't know how you want to get that feeling across whenever you say however you want to say, sometimes you just get rid of the word "but" entirely and make two different sentences, or you just kind of go, you really need, I don't know, you just can replace it with the word "just," for example, because there's no good way to put it. So you can just, "I love you, you just need to clean your room." Like, I don't know. I'm just using that example because we were using it before, but you can do something like that and completely just negate the entire effect.
Ah.
Yeah, we were talking in the break. You were talking about other words that kind of have maybe not the same power, but like
Right.
they also have, when you see them in a sentence or when you hear somebody saying them, they can change the direction.
Yes.
They can change the intended message. So the receiver doesn't hear what the communicator, what the sender was trying to get across.
Yeah, so this is something that I used to write about a lot. I want to say like somewhere between like 2009, 2011, I had like a blog that would update once in a blue moon where I would talk about different power words. But there's every time I say that now. I know, now that I'm talking about it, it's become really meta.
When we chat online, like, I like every time I change the way I talk.
Yeah.
Because it's like I can't use the word
but,
yeah. And I realize that's not what you're saying.
Right.
But
no, not at all. You just have to choose how you're saying it with a purpose.
Right.
So communication is a tool. Most people don't consciously use that tool. They just swing it around like a crazy person with a chainsaw or something, and it just, whatever happens. But you can really hyper-focus that tool. And it's astonishing. People become more responsive to you. You become the type of person people want to be around. Like, even if you're not trying to network, like, people like working with you. There's also the word "because," which there's a really famous psychological study on this word where people were waiting in line to use a copy machine. And the word "because" increased your rate of being able to do whatever it is that you want to do, like cut in line, by about 90-some%.
Really?
So, yeah. So
like,
they have,
I need to get in front of you because I'm in a hurry.
Yes, and that was actually one of the examples they used. And then they switched the wording, and they found out it wasn't the reason. It was literally the word "because." You could have a completely nonsensical reason after the fact. "Because" literally translates to "be the cause." So it's its own justification. So when they were trying to cut in line of the copy machine, they went in and they said, "Hey, can I go ahead of you because I'm in a hurry?" That got about 90, I don't remember, I think it was like 92%, 93% rate of being able to cut in. And the second time they did it, they said, "Hey, can I cut in front of you because I need to use the copier?" And that had a 91%. It literally didn't affect, like, that's exactly the entire reason you're in the line. The word "because" is literally its own justification. It becomes its own power word. And a lot of people don't realize that. That can be used slightly manipulative as well. People's names are also incredibly powerful. That is the most beautiful sound in the world to anybody. That's why you have the cocktail effect. You can sit there and you can be in a crowd of people and you hear your name across the room. You didn't know you were listening to that, but it still snaps you to attention. You're like, "What? What was that? I thought I heard." And you just have this radar that's going out. So you can really snap people's attention back in. And you see this all the time in like sales copy emails when you're on a mailing list where they put your name in the subject or at the beginning. A more effective way to do it would be to do that, but also halfway through the sales copy, insert their name again. And it's almost like you're not expecting that. It jars you to attention, and suddenly you're really focused on the rest of the second half of the email. I've only ever seen one person do that. And even when I read that, it got my attention and I'm aware of why it happened. So it's not something you can help. It's kind of like a subconscious just program running in your mind.
Maddie, we got to start working on our sales copies.
Apparently. Well, I wonder if part of that is, at least I'm looking at it from now on, just analytical or whatever. Mm-hmm. Well, you couldn't just mass email that out to me. My name's in it. Like, right. Granted, all it takes is, a quick Control F. Well, for Microsoft, I don't know about Apple, but like a quick Control F, find, replace.
But I don't think you don't even. See. I was gonna say you don't even have to do that though, because if you're able to work out the programming of what system you're using, you can have it insert that name from the to, or from the to
the name from the email profile.
Yeah.
I was just at my local pharmacy yesterday, and you were talking about names. And I'm sitting there waiting for my prescription or whatever, and this is a HIPAA violation, I think. But somebody next to me, I don't work there, so it's fine. Somebody next to me, their name was Madeline.
Oh.
And they were like, "Hey, we have a prescription for Madeline." And I'm like looking around, suddenly confused.
Yeah.
Because I'm sitting there already, and it's like, wait a minute. Target's a busy place.
Yeah.
I just thought, yeah.
Yeah, it's astonishing. There's also, this is something that I think a lot of people don't understand. I'm just making sure I have time to unpack this.
I promise. Well, yeah, good point.
Yeah, you have the difference between the word what and the word why when you're trying to understand. I mentioned this slightly the last time I was here, but I don't think I did a really clear job of it. So when you're having like a debate or something, or just you're trying to understand why someone's doing what they're doing, the word why gives you really fuzzy answers because the part of your brain that handles your emotions and the part of the brain that handles your word processing are two different spots of the brain. When you say why, it goes to the emotional part of your brain, which is why you get really fuzzy answers. If I ask you, why did you decide to work here or whatever, then they're kind of trying to come up with the answer and they're not really sure. If I ask you what made you decide you want to work here, suddenly it becomes sharp in your thought process, and then you can give really tangible answers because what is a tangible question. So when you're trying to find out someone's why, ask them what made you instead of why did you or why do you want to. What makes you think that? You get much, much clearer responses when you ask the word what.
That also would make sense for children because how many times do you say, why did you do that? And the kid's like, eh?
Yeah.
Now, granted, that's also because sometimes they don't have an actual reason for why they did something, but
I would almost be willing to guarantee you you won't get a response every time. If you say, what made you do that? Like, they might be like, well, I kicked her because she shoved me. I don't know. That's a terrible example, but
yeah. A lot of them, though, when you ask why, at least my kids would say, because.
Yeah.
Which, as David pointed out, automatically means that it's okay for you to cut a line.
No.
Which is why when I want to use the copier, I kick my sister.
Oh, God. And there's all sorts of different things you see happen in, politics, for example, when they give the answer more or less. They make whatever broad, sweeping generalization they want to, and then they go, well, more or less. And then suddenly it becomes okay. But what you remember when you recall it is the statement, and then it becomes fact. And so there's all sorts of little manipulative things you can do too. That's not what this is about because all these little things that you're doing are really simple, but they really change your life. How many things did I just sneak into that sentence?
I will probably go back and take some notes. Because one of the things I find is I don't remember a lot of this stuff, on day-to-day conversations.
Yeah.
When I'm talking to people online, though, and I can go back and read what I wrote, and then I can hear it back played in my head. It's like, oh, that didn't sound the way I wanted it to sound.
Yeah. It helps. If you read it out loud to yourself, you can really clarify if it sounds good or not.
All right.
Yeah, I often like to rewrite things 3 or 4 times some days.
All right, well, Julie Hertz and I will return to our discussion with guest David Gamut right after this short commercial break. This is Maddie Love. You're listening to Atheist Talk on KTNF, AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. Thank you for tuning in to Atheist Talk on AM 950 KTNF. I'm Maddie Love in studio this week with Hertzy Hertz, Julie Love, and Mentalist David Gamut. I don't actually remember now what we were talking about going into the break, but that's fine because that is terrible because to be fair, we talked about a lot during the break.
True.
but where I wanted to go with this segment is, I mean, going kind of continue with like one of the main reasons I wanted to have you back was this part about communicating with people. And so I was wondering, do you find it difficult to find a common ground with people both online and then just even in meet space?
I used to find it a little bit more difficult, but as I started kind of using these things consciously, it's gotten better. I mean, obviously, there's always going to be your troll who really just wants to derail it for their own mulls. But, yeah, most of the time, I'm able to have conversations with people who normally wouldn't be able to just because of the fact that I'm respecting them and making sure that I'm sticking to the idea. So if I post something that is, I know that the general populace are not really thinking about it in the, like if I talk about like religious stuff, for example, the majority of the country's religious, and so I know that I'm probably just going to get a lot of people digging their heels into the ground. So I try to come at it in a way where it's not disrespectful, but I'm clearly criticizing the ideas, but I'm also showing that I'm understanding a lot of the sentiment. I realize that you think, or that you're going to say that there's a lot of good that can come from this as well, and a few people can, and then I address that like before it even becomes an obstacle. When people comment and get really angry or really attacky or whatever, or they just say their piece, I try to make sure I'm hearing them correctly, and I will think, okay, I think this is where they're going. So then I'll just kind of restate that in the beginning. Like, I understand what you mean when you're saying da-da-da-da-da. And depending on what it is, I could say I used to think that way too, or but however, it turns out that I think this is what's actually going on, and you can kind of take this justification where a lot of good can come from it, and that's kind of the shadow all the more extreme stuff can kind of hide under, because they can just kind of use that as like a shield, and the people that are hiding under more, I don't know, moderate stuff aren't going to also actively criticize it. So it's kind of like they're free from criticism because it's justified by the group that won't say we're not about that. And so you just kind of have to unpack it. It becomes more of like a novel in your reply. It's hard to be succinct when you do that, but you're going to make a lot more ground.
Do you run across... Because I feel like some of the stuff that you talk about, it wouldn't be of much use to say a troll. Mm-hmm. Because well, anyway, I say I'm so like hyper aware now on these some of these words I'm using,
and that's a good thing
because
it'll become more natural.
If you're reiterating what they had to say, it's really hard for usually trolls. It's just like, oh, you posted that meme about that you don't that there's Catholic rampant abuse in the Catholic Church. And then they're just going to give you a short, pithy, like, I don't know, atheists are always stupid or something like that. Typical liberal drivel or whatever. It's like, wait, you could be a conservative atheist too. Like, come on. Yeah. So I don't see like trolls using this, I guess. So I guess that makes me happy.
Yeah.
Like
yeah. No. It kind of this goes very. I think it would be kind of difficult for a troll to use this type of thing, because in order to have that effective communication, it kind of takes away the floor to be able to be a troll. Like you if you're trolling, you're more like just cracking a bunch of jokes or attacking the person or just trying to like get a rise out of them. But this type of communication is actively not trying to get a rise out of them. So those two things kind of cancel each other out. I can't see a troll really.
No, I think it's not. I don't know if it's the same as trolling, but like maybe derailing a conversation. Because I have seen where you'll post about
whataboutism.
Yeah, what about it? Well, what about this? And then, but even then, going down that whataboutism,
I can address that too.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so when people say what about this or what about that, I remember a long time. This is a good, tangible, real-life example. This was before marriage equality really became kind of a law. And when we were talking about that, I remember someone in the debate was saying, but they just, a lot of times, it's not about wanting to commit to someone you love. They just want the legal benefits. And so it was kind of moving the goalposts of the conversation. So I had just joined their reality and broke it. So I was like, well, if you want to talk about whether marriage should have benefits, we can do that. Right now, we're talking about equal rights in the marriage, and that kind of reframes it. We can talk about what you're saying too, but now I've just reframed it to marriage itself, and not whether that group gets benefits, but whether everyone gets benefits, and they don't want to lose their benefits, so they immediately, okay, that's not going to happen. That's kind of more moving the goalposts than actual whataboutism. But whenever someone says whataboutism, you can kind of address that by saying that how does that really justify this, though? Or we can also talk about that, but right now we're talking about this here. So that doesn't really make this okay. What can we do to fix this? And then we can fix that one later, too. And you can address it without really being combative. And so it kind of, in a way, you're sort of trying to earn them to your side of having a conversation, even if they won't change their mind. But it keeps the conversation productive.
I've seen currently a lot of times with all of in the political climate of a certain Supreme Court justice, and a lot of people suddenly bringing up, well, false allegations, the fact that men can be, have sexual assault committed against them too.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's in that same, whataboutism.
Yeah.
Well, let's have that conversation. I mean, let's have this conversation now. But yes, that is an important conversation we should have. Not the false allegations part. Well, the men being sexual assault victims. Too.
Yeah, you want to validate the human being. You don't necessarily have to validate the idea. They just have to feel like you've seen them.
Right. And I mean, there's a study that I think Stephanie Savan has linked to sometime in the past that I read, and that actually talked about the question of fraudulent charges and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And I actually found it to be a very interesting article that honestly could be an entire show, so we'll leave it for later. But it is a fascinating thing if you go into it with the idea of, okay, what is reality?
Or just going down the rabbit hole not the rabbit hole, that's a wrong way, that Alex Jules pointed out with the history of racism and white women falsely accusing black men and all the black men that have died from that. But that's way more rabbit holes than we have time for, but that will probably be an episode later. But just that in that same whataboutism, well, what about this and what about that? And it's like, well, those are really good conversations to have maybe. But that's not what we're talking about. And just trying to get... So I like listening to what you're saying, to try to how do I use this to reframe?
Right. Yeah.
No, you're fine. We actually have... Yeah, we should... We're about to end the show, which is really frustrating because I'm really enjoying talking to you. But if you are... And I just minimized that always enjoying talking to you by saying but. If you are listening and a patron, we will continue this conversation.
Yes.
So thank you for tuning in to Atheist Talk. I'm proud to be on the air with Minnesota Atheists and hope you have enjoyed the show. This show depends on the generous support of our members, our sponsors, and donors. Please consider joining or supporting the show through the donation link at mnatheist.org or our Patreon page. This has been Atheist Talk on AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota. All opinions and ideas expressed in today's show are the opinions of the guests and hosts and do not necessarily represent Minnesota Atheists. The podcast for the show will be available in just a couple hours. Have a fantastic Sunday.